turn that back up. All right. Okay. There we go. Should be all sorted now, guys. I apologize about that. I had a little bit of issues with my streaming program. You know, you have these streaming programs, and it's like, why isn't this completely free program not doing exactly the thing that I want it to do? It's like you have everything prepared, and then it comes time for the stream, and everything just falls apart. It's just part of the game, guys. So I apologize about that, and I apologize. A little bit of a rocky start. Hopefully, things go a little bit smoother from now on. So I'm just going to start off with the intro that I was supposed to say. Hello and good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us for Crit and Miss's Critical Conversations. Yay! It's good to be back. I've only done one of these streams in the past, where I was joined by Hadrian, and we caught up with everything that was happening during the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus campaign, which I DM for Othic Gaming's channel. But unfortunately, Hadrian couldn't make it to join with us tonight. So we're going to be joined by my good friend and one-time player in one of my campaigns, Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Yeah, not too bad. Currently have COVID, so I'm locked down in my bedroom, so I don't give the rest of the family. It's been 24 hours, and I'm already going stir crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, good thing is you don't have kids, do you?
I got 2 kids. Yeah.
You got 2 kids? Okay, well then, yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
If it wasn't for the kids, I'd have the whole house to myself.
You're shit out of luck there, buddy.
Yeah.
I hope you've got like a really good TV setup, and you can just sit them in front of the TV and just sit down and play D&D online.
I got the PlayStation. I've got the flat screen TV. I pulled everything out of the
on the
study
kids'
into here.
rooms.
Yeah, I've got the little camping table set up in the corner. Yeah, it's a great setup.
Awesome. And joining us as well for the first time on Critical Conversations, it's a familiar face if you've been watching our Amongst Shadows and Stone campaign, which we're running every second Friday. It was meant to be a one-shot. It's now ended up being a 3-parter because every epic story needs to be a 3-parter. It needs to be a trilogy. You got Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. What else is a trilogy? Give me a trilogy.
Everything just keeps getting remade in more versions because
Is Shrek a trilogy?
No,
they've got a 4th one, the one with
See, they ruined it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's like Shrek 64 now. I'm pretty sure it's just followed suit with.
Is Madagascar a trilogy? There's 3 of that one, right?
Indiana Jones should be a trilogy.
It should be. Yeah, there's lots of movies that just should have been a trilogy, and
we are the next Madagascar confirmed here.
They get hooked on those member berries. You remember member berries from South Park?
Yeah,
member. And they just got to go back, and they just ruin everything. Anyway, so if you're unfamiliar with what Critical Conversations is, guys, it's just a little bit of a stream that I put together where I can just sit down with some good friends, and we can just shoot the shit and just talk about some D&D stuff. We're going to talk about some stuff which is happening on the channel. We're going to talk about some stuff that is going to happen on the channel. We've got a pretty exciting little announcement. We're going to be catching up with some of the stuff that other people have been involved in. For instance, our good friend Christian. Why don't you introduce yourself, Christian? For those people who haven't watched Amongst Shadows and Stone, give them a little bit of background, and then we'll use that as a little bit of a segue to talk about what you've been up to last weekend.
Yeah, easy. So, long story short, I'm not officially a part of Crit and Miss. I've been lucky enough to kind of form this relationship and partnership with them and Sven just through networking and trying to find like-minded people that love the same things I do. Obviously, like, this is a kind of hobby for him and eventually hopefully becomes a business. It's the same for me. Like me and my partner run D&D Hermes. But the great thing with these types of work and jobs is that it's something that you have actual dedication and inspiration towards. So it's nice to even just chat about people. Usually you don't want to talk about work outside of work. It's the complete opposite for myself and Sven here, where you want to work, then when you finish work you talk about work, and it's a nice little thing. But no, I'm with D&D Hermes. And when I get a chance, I'll explain what we do with that in case anyone's interested. But no, it's lovely to be here for the my first Critical Conversations. We've got some cool things I know that are coming up there. I'm going to be getting very spicy with topics and seeing if people are one side or the other, good old state of origin style.
Yeah. So basically, to make a short story even shorter, Christian is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are a professional DM.
Yeah. So basically, with D&D Hermes, my partner handles home crafts and decorations for what I run as kind of like, I guess, in a more dignified way, a party clown. So I hired out for events, whether it is a birthday party or people just wanting to have a fun weekend with their friends or try D&D for the first time. They hire me, and either I come out to their place if they have an area, or just run it at my house because I've got the whole D&D set up already, or do it online, which is great because it means people can do it anywhere in Australia or across the world if they want to, if we eventually get to that point, with Discord, and I've got all the different programs and whatnot needed for all of that. But no, I run the sessions, and then with all of the home crafts my partner does, what we try to do is make it a bit more of an experience for people. Obviously, anyone can run D&D. You can use your bloody Legos for all you want. Do a little setup with your friends or your children, get them into it. But we try to make it a bit more of a memorable thing where the session that I run with you hopefully will be something that people will be talking about, you and your friends will be talking about for weeks after and want to do it again. To get into that, basically, as an example, our one-shots are themed, and that's what Jess's crafts are after. So one, for example, is a frost giant, Arusag the herder, and it's kind of chase of your adventuring party traveling through blizzards, through all of these raided villages, trying to kind of track them through the snow and the attrition and all of that, and eventually find Arusag. So for the decorations, Jess has made a lot of things like skull plates, little kind of woven baskets. We've got a large hammer, cow skull, stuff like that, just so it's very kind of giant thematic and like raiding barbarian gets that sort of a feel. Complete 180, another one is a vampire countess. So for that one, she's organized a whole lot of things like mini chandeliers that we place around the room, and silverware, nice lights, little vials of blood that she's kind of crafted together. And it just gives the whole theme and room a feel. I play music during the session as well, setting the tone for like boss fights or just general walking through the town, stuff like that. And it just gives the entire thing a bit more of a kind of like whole package experience. Apart from that, though, yeah, we do all the other stuff under the sun. D&D's Hermes Services has all the services. I run DM tutoring. We have a bunch of things, custom miniatures, because we've got a 3D printer. I create content on D&D Beyond, so items, monsters, feats, backgrounds, everything like that, and it's all integratable, so you can actually use the dice and roll everything, so you don't need to do it manually if you want to. And yeah, it's been going really well. We've been going to a couple of events. Got some more events coming up in the future, and as everyone else has probably seen with Dungeons and Dragons, our business has been exploding over these last couple of weeks. So we're really lucky for that. So for any of you that are following us, thank you for that. And if you're not, give us a follow.
Yeah, so I've just shared a link for D&D Hermes Facebook page there. Christian has helped me out a lot with Among Shadows and Stone, the stream that I do every second week, the three-parter that we talked about earlier. So we want to show Christian a little bit of love. So if anyone's watching this, either catching up on YouTube or listening on Spotify, because it will all end up on those sources, just head over to www.facebook.com/Hermes D&D. That is HERMES DND. It's that simple. You can see all the things that they've done. You guys were recently at what was it? Tabletop Con down on the Gold Coast. You ran a couple of games. Is that right? We're looking at it on the stream. Tell us about that.
No, it was an awesome event, actually. It was ran by a now friend of mine, Anthony. Let me get his details up here. He did an awesome job. They're kind of just starting to expand into it now. Anthony Balsamo. So him and his, I think, partner, I'll have to find out later, but they basically started it up and had their very first one. It was actually a lot bigger than we expected. They ran it in the... they ran it in the community center. Hopefully, obviously, we can get bigger venues and like probably council stuff in the future. But they had a group running like Pathfinder, and so they had a large display screen that was playing audio clips from Pathfinder. They had tables running a lot of other board games and a selection of like 50 board games that people could just kind of grab and play at free tables themselves. There was a bunch of other small businesses like ourselves that were starting things off. So we sat next to a lovely couple that have a company called 1000 Rats, and they had a board game similar to Coop or Mafia, if you've ever played it. And it was great. They actually live in Annalee, so we're going to be organizing some stuff with them soon. But we went there. We had full tables for every session, which was great. Much more than we expected. I was expecting it to be more like an advertising, just getting a name out there. But we had so much interest with the morning session on Saturday, and then other people that had played at other games saw all the laughs and listening to the music that we did have kind of going in our corner of the community center. And so we actually got people from other tables that then wanted to come. They came when we finished it, like I think it was 2 p.m. Started in the morning around 8 o'clock, and then and then the other session was 6 until 10. And so people came after the 2 p.m. session, were like, hey, do you still have any chairs free for the afternoon one? Like, it looked like heaps of fun. So no, it went awesome. Apart from that, the event itself was great for networking. Like I said, 1000 Rats, we got in touch with another company, Ardent Role Plays as well, who was beside us doing Call of Cthulhu. And that was an amazing thing. So next year when it's up, hopefully we might even see Sven down there running a table for a Crit and Miss.
Well, I was actually going to say, when are they going to do that here in Townsville? When are they going to come to Townsville? I want my chance. I want to run a table. I want Tom to be a part of it. I want Tom at my game. Tom,
it does sound awesome.
You can be DMing.
Well, maybe if I get enough experience, then yeah.
You don't need experience.
You just wing it. But no, it was really good. And then coming up in April in Brisbane rather than the Gold Coast. It was a lovely trip going to the Gold Coast, but it's always nice when something's local, like you said, with you wishing for stuff in Townsville. So anyone in Townsville, hit up Sven if you want to set up something. But in Brisbane, they've got BrisCon coming up soon, which is actually being kind of advertised by the Brisbane City Council. It's a lot bigger than previous years, and they've got a larger space. And so I was approaching Fraser, who's the person running it all from Brisbane Wargaming, and he didn't have an RPG set up yet, so it was an awesome opportunity, and he's organized a demonstration participation area for us there. So if you're there, come and check it out. I think it's the 23rd and 24th of April, but we're running a morning and an afternoon session. The morning is a one-shot. And I haven't decided which one we'll do yet. I've got a lot of pre-made options, and then the afternoon is I'm going to do a custom battle royale PvP Dungeons and Dragons. So people will sign up during the morning sessions or as they're walking through the event, and then we're going to do a 2 versus 2 versus 2 versus 2 for the afternoon, and obviously that just means people there, even if you're not playing, you can watch all these people fighting with their PCs. So that should be really fun.
That's going to be interesting, man. Especially PvP. I've seen some PvP action in campaigns, just small stuff, but actually seeing a PvP, I don't even know how you're going to structure that. I want to keep in touch because I've been interested. I've been thinking about that kind of thing. So keep in touch. I want to know how you structure it, how it works, and maybe if it's possible, maybe we can even grab a quick stream or a quick video from that, and we can chuck that up on the feed and show people what's going on.
I would gladly get a video. Awesome. I'm more than happy to get that, chuck that up. I'm planning on doing it on ours as well, so we'll tag everyone. And then maybe even on another Critical Conversations, if I come back again, we can talk about running PvP scenario, because it is complex. I've done it in the past with some of my friend groups over the years, and kind of worked out the kinks and making sure that it doesn't go for too long, because you all know with D&D, there's the person who has their their turn planned out. They take 30 seconds, and then there's that person that something happens on the turn before, and they sit there for 10 minutes rubbing their chin as they're like, should I use this? Should I use this? And then they change everything. So
reading the full description of every single spell that Evans has had.
Yeah. So PvP can get very complex, and everyone obviously, unlike fighting a monster, everyone wants to win, but there always has to be a loser, unfortunately. So as a DM, it's very awkward to balance that and get harmony, so people still enjoy it. So we can definitely discuss that at some point in the future.
I have had lots of experience being a loser, so I think I'd be perfect for that. That's no problem at all.
It's in your genes.
It's in my genes. It's built into me. I was born with it, and I was raised into it. That's awesome. And if you're watching the stream, either live or watching it back on YouTube, I just got a couple of pictures up that I'm sharing on the stream. Just have a couple of the shots that you took from your time at Tabletop Con.
That was great. I think the best scenario we had was one of the characters was a bugbear fighter rune knight, so he could go the enlarged form, and I threw them all into a bamboo maze. He went enlarged, and so I homebrewed a little interaction where if he failed a strength save, he was going to be basically restrained inside the bamboo because it was all 5 feet squares. So he got restrained, got pushed over from a failed strength check from another creature that was there, and everyone started using his body as a fighting platform, basically standing on top of him because he was above all of the bamboo, basically.
Bamboo's nasty shit too. It'll cut you up.
Yeah. But no, it was a great event. So check out the pictures, and definitely come next time. And if you support Sven and Miss enough, maybe even some financial support, he can do a road trip down next year to the Gold Coast. That'd be lovely.
I've got to admit, when you put up on Facebook that you were going to be doing the Brisbane, what's that one called again? The Brisbane one?
BrisCon.
BrisCon, that's the one. When you put up on Facebook at BrisCon, I was immediately looking at my finances to see if I could somehow make it work. So who knows? Hey, maybe I could make it, maybe not. Because
do it.
I should be getting a little bit of extra money soon, and I was hoping to pour into Crit and Miss because, like you said, it's not a huge financial source of income for me. In fact, I've done everything. I've paid for everything out of my own money. I haven't earned a cent doing this, so it's really just a passion project that I would really like to be able to expand upon. So if anyone does feel like donating, I'll actually chuck in the chat there, and it should be in the description of the YouTube video as well. Just
all
a
us
link.
indie business owners.
Yeah, all scraping for money, all hands out begging for a little bit extra. At least I know I am.
No, likewise. We actually released our Patreon on D&D Hermes a couple of days ago because obviously these types of things, you run events sometimes when people book in, but it's not a permanent income, but you want to grow it to something like that. Like I know me and Jess, our dream is to eventually open a game store. And with yourself, get to the point where obviously your stream starts taking off and becomes your full-time thing, I'm guessing. So yeah, it's tough, but the grind is worth it when it does start to get there. Hopefully, fingers crossed for all of us.
And speaking of aspirations when it comes to D&D, Tom, you're taking on your first ever time as a DM.
Shortly, yes. So I was having conversations with my current DM. We're going through Tyranny of Dragons, and he was saying he wants to try and do some one-shots or something like that, or wants to try and find another group where he can be a player. And I said, well, I'm happy to DM after this one, because he wants to run Curse of Strahd next. He's very keen on that. But I said, in between, how about I try and run a campaign? And he's like, oh, that'd be fantastic. So I'm like, well, what I'm going to run? I don't want to do a huge campaign that's going to take too long. So I've sort of decided I'm going to do homebrew straight off the bat. So I think I've had enough experience with D&D as a whole to basically just jump in head first.
I what did I play? I played maybe 6, 7 months, something like that, of Curse of Strahd. That was my very first campaign, and then I was like, you know what, I want a DM, and
Yeah,
I didn't know what I was doing. I'd only played Curse of Strahd. I mean, come on. So I just dove headlong into it. You know, obviously I'm one of those people who's listened to like 3,000 hours of podcasts and stuff like that, so I have a little bit of an idea.
yeah.
But I was
And
just
all of those are always homebrew anyway, so it gives you so many different ideas of how different people can run them. And
that's
obviously,
actually
anything that's online, people are purposely trying to be entertaining, so they're going to be chaotic. They're going to throw so many curveballs to the DM. You learn how they are going to deal with all those different issues.
That's I was about to say that's actually a really good segue. I know it wasn't the way that I wrote how things were going to work for tonight's stream, but that's actually a really good segue. When I started organizing this episode of Crit and Miss, I threw it out to the guys. You know, what kind of topics do you want to talk about? And the one that why don't you explain your topic, Christian? We'll just jump straight into that because that's a really good segue.
No, easy. So, just to make sure that it makes sense for the segue itself, my topic that I was wanting to discuss for the podcast for tonight was modules versus homebrew, the pros and cons of each, what people prefer doing, and what might be best for you, basically, because obviously there's a lot of points for both and whatnot. But yeah, that's our first topic, something that I've always been keen on myself because like yourself, Tom, my first time DMing was just straight away into homebrew. And it kind of just comes onto personal preferences at that sort of a point. But I'll let you start and then we'll start talking about it all. But what made you want to do homebrew first rather than a module?
For me, it's a case of I constantly have so many different ideas about different genres and things like that, and I have nothing really to do with them. That's why I fell in love with D&D, because I can come up with these characters and come up with backstories and how they would react in certain situations. And although I don't get to play pretty much 90% of them, I get to come up with them and get to play some of them. Being a DM, it means I can create a whole world and the lore behind it and everything like that. I know from a lot of the books that I read, which are always fantasy genre or their dark grim genre, I like to hear more about the lore. I love it when they expand. Like, you get the first book and it gives you the basis, but over the next several books, it expands on that whole world. I really enjoy that, and I'd love to be able to have an outlet for that creativity and the ideas that I have. And although it could be a short campaign, it means I could possibly do what Critical Role did, where although they started in one part of their universe, they just expanded further and further, and it all became interconnected. Very much like a lot of the modules where they are all in the same realm, but they're just in different parts. It's all the same world.
No, I know 100% what you mean. I've got the same interest for learning about the background and lore. I know, as a perfect example, Lord of the Rings. I loved the movies, I loved the books, but didn't fully go too much into the books. I started with the movies when I was a child. But one of the main things that I loved was reading the books, reading like Wikipedia pages and stuff, and learning about the extensive history that wasn't included in the movie. So stuff like the Blue Mages, who were down in the southern realms that you never actually saw in the movies, where Gandalf came from, why they weren't able to use their full power and magic and everything, and just all this information that it's just fun to learn about. Like, even if it doesn't impact what you already know, it's just cool little tad bits and pieces. And I agree the same way with making a world as well. Where it's nice to kind of see it grow and build. I'm doing the same thing as yourself. I'm wanting to eventually get a world published, basically. So my personal groups that I run with, I've got 2 parties, and I'm creating a trilogy of 3 adventures that'll also have their own custom content and homebrew and everything. And it's just great being able to do whatever you want with all these ideas. Like the same thing you mentioned, one session, they might be in a Fey realm fighting furbolgs and the wobberjack. And the very next session, even though it makes sense to them story-wise, they'll then be on a pirate ship heading towards a tiefling capital. It's completely different subjects, to completely different everything, but in the story sense, it makes sense. And then for you as a DM, it gives you that chance to have fun with all this creative juice that you have and all these cool ideas that you want to see come to life, rather than with pre-made modules and whatnot, where you have to follow the set things. You may have a cool idea for like, oh, this would be cool if this happened, but you can't do it because if you branch out in that segue, it ruins the rest of the story and things might not meet up, and you're a bit restricted in that sense.
Definitely, and even if you do want to make a change like that, you have to read through very detailed to make sure that nowhere in the future you decide, oh, that character, he doesn't really do anything in this, so why don't I just swap him out with someone more interesting? And then you realize, no, actually, he becomes so much more important in like 4 or 5 sessions.
It's like the butterfly effect of going back in time, like Loki with the stone. Just completely changes everything if you make one small decision. So it's really passive aggressively chaotic with pre-made modules.
Saying that, I have looked at a few online modules, a few modules online, and people who have run them several times commenting on where you can make changes and where you can improve on. So things such as, you don't need to run this travel time, nothing happens there. You can quite easily, the one bit of information that they will gain from this travel time, you can have them get at a tavern. And you get rid of about an hour worth of very needless conversation that they're really trying to get something out of. They feel like anything you put in front of them, it needs to be an encounter of some sort or a puzzle, or they're trying to get intel in some way. But in this case, there's nothing there. So you're just going to confuse and, annoy the players basically, because they're going to feel like they didn't do what was asked of them.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a boring kind of filler episode in D&D.
Yeah.
You want every single session to be exciting. Talking about homebrew and everything, a perfect example, if you've been watching the streams with Crit and Miss, is Sven's Amongst the Shadows and Stones. Sven?
Yeah, so it's a pretty good point that you bring up. Yeah, so I wrote Amongst Shadows and Stone, and I'll give you a little bit of detail about how I actually wrote that. I have my original notes here somewhere. I don't know. I'm not going to look them up right now. They're somewhere in this room, in this mess of a room that I call my home base. The way Shadows and Stone, or Amongst Shadows and Stone, actually came about was I was actually running a campaign module, an officially written campaign module, but I like Tom touched on earlier. I felt that there was some things that were just missing from the campaign module, so I decided to spice things up a little bit. I added a new antagonist to add a little bit of a layer of mystery to the campaign, and one of the characters decided to look into this particular individual, and it led to him actually something that is heavily frowned upon on D&D. They split the party, and he went off on his own way, and to do a little bit of investigation to find out if this particular person was actually an evil person, or if it was just a matter of circumstance. And I ran that session for that one player, for him, like just on his own, and it turned out to be such a fun experience. He enjoyed it so much, and I enjoyed writing it. But there are a few things about homebrew stuff that we will touch upon in a little bit. I really enjoyed writing it so much that I was like, hey, I'm going to turn this into like a full-blown standalone adventure that people can run. I'm going to chuck it up for free. So if you're interested and want to check it out, I'll chuck that back up on my Facebook page, on Crit and Miss Facebook page, I should say, when we're finished with part 3, because I don't want there to be any spoilers. But the thing about homebrew is, yes, you get a lot of freedom. You can do whatever you want because you're the DM. If you say that guy, has a third arm sprout from his forehead, there's no book to tell you that you're wrong or that you've done something wrong.
He
And I
has
think
the third arm.
he has the third arm.
Yeah.
He's got it now. You're the DM. You said it. That happened. And that's not going to mess anything up in the future because you can just write that into your campaign. That's one of the trip ups that people have with official modules, though. One thing that you have to understand when you're writing a homebrew campaign or a homebrew adventure or whatever it is, I'm sure that you've probably noticed this as well, Christian, when you were writing your one shots. Every time you write something, you've then created 5, 10 other things that you also have to write. If you write a character, you've now got to give them a background. You've got to give them a family. You've got to give them items and all this kind of stuff. And every time you write something, and then you write, oh, okay, he belongs to this family. Okay, then you've got 3 other people that you've got to write backgrounds for, and you can get into this like cascade where you're just writing. At some point, you have to like call it quits, and
Yeah.
that's where a lot of people get tripped up in official D&D modules, like the ones that we have up on the stream there. Some of them are already, I don't know how many pages. They've got a lot of content in them. And I'm sure that the writers of those campaigns could continue writing, but they had to call it quits somewhere. They had to stop. And that's sort of your role as a DM, is to sort of pick up where they stopped and fill in the gaps. Even though you have this officially written module, even though you have Amongst Shadows and Stone, for instance, you'll find that there's bits of information when you read it where you go, well, he hasn't really expanded upon this. It's because if I kept going, I would have written a 1,000 page document like you guys were talking about earlier with all the lore and all that kind of stuff. I'm like
This,
you guys, man. I can just like go down that rabbit hole and just keep going.
Neil's
keep going.
the NPC's biography, 600 pages.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is-
I would just keep going, but I found I had to at some point I had to say stop. I like just stop. Don't give them any more information. There's some locations that are in the campaign which I have left purposefully vague. Someone might read that and go, well, you know, why hasn't he given a reason for why this is there, or why this particular deity is in this, you know, worshipped in this location? Not to give anything away, but it's because I had to stop. And when they're writing these official modules, they do the same thing. When you're running a campaign, and I've run a few official modules now, I've run a couple, not many. I'm not like an expert or anything like that. But what you have to realize is, even though it's written down in a book, it's still going to end up being homebrew to some extent.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to just completely ignore what's written in the book and just do your own thing.
On that note, I think that's a good part to also mention the negative side to homebrew and what makes it difficult for people. Even though it's a something that you need to make sure that you have, whether it's modules or homebrew, being able to creatively and also narratively make up stuff on the fly can not only be difficult but also daunting for a lot of DMs, whether it's your first time, which it's obviously then especially seems like Mount Everest. Someone asks you, oh, what's this NPC's favorite fruit? And the person's like, I have no idea. What region are they from? Is it summer, autumn, or what race are they? They start overthinking it sometimes. Or they say something and then they forget it sessions later. Just a homebrew itself, whether it's from a module or creating your own story, can just seem like this huge task. And even for people that have been, I know some friends of mine who've been doing sessions for ages. They started with Adventurers League, and homebrew itself just feels like such a wide berth of, like you said, Sven, all these possibilities for stuff that could happen. Sometimes you just have to stop writing and just be inventive with it when players bring it up in a session. But for some players, for some dungeon masters, that is the negative part of homebrew, I feel, where the extensivity, the range of stuff that could happen, would happen, what you need to write about, just becomes creatively very scary for some people.
Yeah, you've got to get the basics, and that's I was actually going to get this in. This is actually going to be my topic. What are good qualities for a DM to have? Well, you got to have confidence. Yeah. When you're a DM, if someone asks you a question, you can't be like, maybe it's. You got to be able to confidently say, he likes dragon fruits, to build upon your example earlier on. And then once you've said that, you've got to have the confidence to just roll with that. That's the thing that a lot of people struggle with. Nothing in D&D, even the rules, the very rules themselves, are fluid, are pliable. They're not. If you break a rule or you say something when you're running an official module, official campaign, you say something that's not written down in the book, no one's gonna show up on your door, knocking on the door to fine you for doing something that wasn't part of it. If you're gonna be a DM, you got to be you got to be confident, and you got to be creative.
Oh, definitely. I find with D&D, it is not a perfect game. I've seen the discussion online before where people are saying it's flawed, and other people say no, it works great because I run all these games and it works great for us. In terms of the rules, there are big arguments about rules as written, as rules versus intended.
I don't know.
There's also a
that
load
does
to
rules
do
written.
with the power balance as well, whereas you could play a Beastmaster Ranger or you could play a Twilight Cleric, and realistically they are on different levels. If you're rolling for your size to begin with, someone could end up with really low, someone could end up with really high. What's great with D&D though is it is just the framework for your game. So it's up to the DM to take that and then build upon it. If you find there's a character who just doesn't seem to be getting any use out of his class or anything like that, you can give him a magical item to help him out, or you could just turn around and say, this doesn't seem to be working, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, okay, you've got a 16 in charisma and you're a bard, it just doesn't seem to be working, I'm going to give you an 18. I'm just going to balance it out and make it work. That's where it works, is having a DM who can take control of that.
What you just said about it being a framework is the perfect example, the easiest metaphor for this, or like I guess an example of like a framework making something more fun, I would say, is like Skyrim. Skyrim itself, amazing game, people have fun with it. Dungeons and Dragons, amazing game, people have fun with it. 5th edition, well, as soon as you add in Skyrim with mods, it starts to either become hilarious, really fun for people, all these new possibilities, extremely more captivating when people start adding in graphics upgrades or extra stories and plots. And that's what Dungeons and Dragons is. Dungeons and Dragons is a great game, but it's a kind of like hatchwork and framework for people to make their own Dungeons and Dragons. I've got my own rules. I don't follow the same things. And that's what makes it really, really great for people to play.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's explained either in the DM's handbook or in the player's handbook, or the, what's it called again, the DM's fucking one, I can't remember. But they actually say that themselves. Like these rules are not meant to restrict your gameplay. They're just there as inspiration for you to build upon and to make the game your own. I think that's the most important part, and that's why homebrew is so awesome, and where campaigns can be. The good thing about official modules and official campaigns, because it cuts your prep time down by an absolute crapload. When you got to write everything yourself, you have a lot of prep time. So take an official module and run it as if it were homebrew. Run it as if you wrote it, and you're going to have a really great time. If anyone's watched the campaign Baldur's Gate Sent to Avernus, which I DM for Othic Gaming's channel, I'll chuck his link for his Twitch channel in the chat as well. You'll notice straight away, the episodes aren't up on YouTube or anything like that. They're gone, but we do have them saved, so hopefully they'll go up on YouTube a little bit later. You'll notice straight away I've changed everything from the very beginning of the game. I start off with 2 players and add another 2 players onto it. They go to a completely different set of missions. I took what they gave me in the module and I turned it into homebrew. That's what you're supposed to do with campaign modules, at least from my opinion.
No, I agree 100%. And even if you're not in that sense of being as creative, that's also a good kind of, I guess, segue into what makes pre-made modules good and so amazing apart from homebrew. Like homebrew is amazing, and I can't say more about it because it's more better things just because that's all that I run is homebrew. But I do see the positivity of modules being where people that are more analytical rather than creative in their mind, how their mind works, how they run things, and they're wanting to try to be a dungeon master. You don't want to tell them, no, you can't do this because you can't think of that NPC liking dragon fruit. Like, that's stupid. Instead, people that are more analytical can read the module front to back if they want to, learn how it all works. And modules are great where you don't need to be creative. It gives you amazing names for the NPCs. It gives you the roles that characters need to make when they're looking for a certain item. It tells you what a room looks like and gives you even like eerie phrases and words to explain it. A shivering mist floats through the town, and phrases such as that in the module itself. That way you don't have to worry about the daunting sensation of homebrew, of making something yourself, if you don't have that kind of creative spark, which isn't a bad thing. Some people's minds just don't work like that.
Or if you're like me and you've got 2 jobs, run a stream, 2 kids,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. I don't got time for that shit, man. Give me a book, I'll build on it.
Writing a session that's fun, enjoyable, as well as detailed is very consuming. It's like writing a book. It takes a lot of time.
Took me months to finish Among Shadows and Stone. When I actually decided to turn it into a standalone adventure, took me months to write that. And how many pages is that? You got it open, Tom. How many pages is that? Like 13 pages?
17.
17 pages. Took me months to write that.
There's a fair few maps in there as well.
Yeah, so a lot of filler content.
Wow. Well, now that I've started mine, I plan to go from level 3 to level 8. I'm now thinking it's going to take me a lot longer than I originally thought.
Yeah, and that's what I touched upon earlier. Know when to stop. Know when to stop writing. Know when your creativity is gonna be able to take over. Get the basics down, and you know yourself better than anyone else. So you'll know when you can stop writing, and when your creativity is just gonna take what you wrote down earlier, and just fly with it.
Yeah, I have told my players that it's a bit of a cop out. That it's going to be a bit railroady.
Yep.
As in, the way it's going to work is, the idea is mercenaries that are down on their luck, have no money, and they're in a tavern, and an event happens, and then the next day they end up looking for work, and they find a rich benefactor who's looking for some mercenaries to have on hand at all times, and they get given a very easy task to begin with to see if they're worth their time. And then after that, all they do is they get a letter every now and again saying, hey, I need you to do this. Or, hey, this has happened, go fix it for me. And they get paid for it. And slowly throughout the campaign, they realize that in some cases, there's a reason why that's happening, and it all builds down to a final plot point. There's hints here and there as they go through. They realize that things are starting to get connected, depending on how hard they look, depending on what they research, things like that. And it all comes to a conclusion in the end. And I said, with that, it means that I have it gives me a little bit more leeway in the case of, here's exactly what I need you to do. I don't have to write a huge amount of backstory as to why they need to. It's a case of, it's on a piece of paper, you're going to get paid to go do this.
One of the main things that I often don't like as well, people saying is a horrible thing with modules. I do see the point and understand the point, but the whole fact of modules being all railroaded stories, like you have to follow it from A to Z.
Yeah.
And I feel like even though, yes, that is a negative, it's also... Ooh, one sec. Leaving you on a cliffhanger. It's also a positive, to be honest, purely because it means that you have an engaging story from start to finish.
Yep.
These have been written by professionals, people that have degrees in creative writing, psychology, knowing how to make things entertaining. And yes, you may want to change things up, add things yourself in homebrew. It's great because you can be free flowing if someone decides to do something. And there's that stigma of, oh, I don't want to do real world because I don't want to be told what to do. D&D is meant to be me making the decisions, the players making the decisions, and it still is that in pre-made modules. If people are trying them for the first time, you still have the freedom to make decisions, and then you basically just keep following that same narrative. It's very much similar to, and I explain this to a lot of people when I'm telling them about D&D for the first time, those old books that I don't know if you guys read them as kids or know about them, but the create your own story books, where you would start on page 1, on page like 5 or 10, it would then say skip to this page or this page, and it is railroaded, but it is still enjoyable because you're still having influence over the story.
Yep. Well, I'm playing Tyranny of Dragons, and it's well renowned to be one of the biggest, the most railroaded modules there are. However, I'd only played with Sven once, and I'd played 2 games of a 3.5 campaign that was just coming up to a wrap. So I didn't have a huge amount of experience playing, but I had a lot of experience with D&D, watching hours upon hours of streams and YouTube. But the other players are all brand new. So for us, it was a case of, it made it a lot easier for us to know what we were supposed to do. Like, I thought I'd go into D&D and be like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Insight check. I know exactly what. Once you're in the seat and you're like, oh, I've got to make the decisions, you start forgetting things, or you realize after, oh, I should have asked this, or oh, I should have investigated that, or
Insight check.
That's right. That's
Insight
right.
check.
Insight check. We did finish the dungeon and we didn't look for treasure. Wow. And so you ask the DM the next day, like, hey, was there treasure in there? He's like, yeah, you guys didn't look for it. Like, great. So the fact that it's railroady doesn't necessarily mean that you are forced in that direction. It just means it's very clear of which direction you should probably go in. And if it's written well, it's not in a case of, oh, you will go do this. It's a case of, you can do whatever you want. However, it's quite clear that the best option for everyone, and the option that you want to do, is exactly what the game wants you to do. Okay, the bad guys just destroyed the town and you barely made it out alive. They're now going back to their camp. Well, we want to hunt them down and we want to get them. We're going to follow them to their camp. Well, it just turns out that's exactly what they want you to do.
Yes, and the thing is, and I've spoken to my players about this a lot. Players descent to Avernus and previous ones as well. I tell them, you're welcome to do whatever you want. Don't feel like I'm forcing you down a road. But I will say this: it may be a little bit railroading, but the content that I have written is going to be better than the content that I can come up with on the top of my head. Yeah. So, they're free to go wherever they want, do whatever they want. They can leave Baldur's Gate and just, go on a trek to Neverwinter if that's what they want to do. Go for it. But I'm not going to be prepped for that, so it's going to be me coming up with stuff, and I cannot think quickly enough to what's it called? Just to ad-lib this off the top of my head. So if you want the better content, you'll run with what I have prepared. But if you want to go off the rails, go for it. Yeah, and as you guys know, I'm coming up on another campaign, which I'll be starting on the 18th of March. And it's really interesting comparing Out of the Abyss. Oh, there he is. He's back again. It's really interesting comparing how Out of the Abyss is written in comparison to something like Baldur's Gate. The beginning of Baldur's Gate specifically, it wants you to go to certain places. Out of the Abyss, however, you can just you make the decision. You can walk straight into the final boss. Not to give away spoilers, but that's a possibility. You can just walk straight there and just get murdered.
Wow. Yeah.
It's possible. So there are official modules which are more sandboxy. So you have all the locations out, but the people can just go wherever they want. So if you're into that kind of thing, just do the research. If you have an idea of what kind of game you want to play, you don't want to take the time to write homebrew stuff. It's all good. Do your research, because every campaign is different, man.
And one thing I will say as well, why it's important to do your research, is probably one of the negatives with pre-made modules, and it's how a majority of them are very low level. They often start at level 1, sometimes travel up to level 3, 5, or 8. And there's not many pre-made modules that are high level ones, level 10 to 20. Some of them get to that point, but to get to that point, you have to go through months, if not sometimes a year or two of IRL sessions, depending on how often your group can kind of get together and play. And that's one of the things I don't like about the pre-made modules, and one of the negatives that I do find from it, because if you have played a lot of D&D, or if you're new to this, don't fall for this mistake of, because you're new, you think you have to play level 1, starting at level 1 with the story. My first time when I first went into D&D, my group that I was playing with at the time, I ran 4 different stories of different people trying DMs and stuff, and it was fun. The stories were unique. One of them was level 5, the other 3 were level 1s. And it was just so much of like a boring gruel of playing a character that got taken out in like 1 hit. Only some of them, like the cleric and whatnot and wizard, actually had a subclass, and it just felt extremely boring and restrictive.
Yep.
With your pre-made ones, if you guys are going to do them, definitely do your research. Welcome to try level 1 to try out with, or if you guys are wanting to do that, or grind through the story. But D&D is a lot more fun once you start hitting levels 3, 5, 10. You start reaching these large feats that your characters can do. So that's one of the things I don't like about pre-made modules.
It's
very
more
much
fun for
agree.
players, definitely. But as a DM, I don't know about you, Christy, but I really like it when my players are really squishy.
I think level 3 is a good place to start.
Yeah, 100%.
So with level 3, you've got your subclass. If you're an experienced player, it's a great place to start. But even if you're a beginner, I think as long as you have an idea about how D&D works as a whole, you don't need to know all the rules, but you got a reasonable idea or how some sort of tabletop works, then, or even if you've watched D&D online, I think you know enough that level 3 is not too much for you to be able to take on. With level 1, I find it does drag on, and it's things such as you have so few abilities, you can cast the 1 or 2 spells that you have, and then you're done, and then it's just you can only do cantrips. You're like, that's all I can do until I rest. You feel like it's a bit of a grind.
No, I always prefer to start at least at level 3, even with people that are trying out Dungeons and Dragons for the very first time, and not even just for the complexity of the sessions, but even just for the interest in the actual PCs that they're playing as. There's nothing more boring than being human fighter, orc barbarian, but when you're the orc barbarian that is the Storm Herald Tundra, you make frost on your armor that surrounds all of your allies. It makes your character feel a lot more in-depth, and it's your unique person you're playing as. When you're the fighter that has the fighting stance archer and whatever subclass you choose, you start to feel like that's your character that you're playing as, and you're not just playing as generic default.
Well, the character I came up with for the Tyranny of Dragons, I was told that Tyranny of Dragons was from level 1 through to level 20. I have now come to realize it's not. It's only to level 14, which is a disappointment. But I was like, which character am I going to take to level 20? Like, this is a huge opportunity. It's pretty much never going to happen again, going from level 1 to level 20. I went Paladin. I'll go Paladin. I want Oath of Vengeance Paladin. Came up with a huge backstory about how he was a half-elf, basically out of wedlock, was a bastard. His dad kept him around, even though he resented him for being basically from his wife cheating. Ran away, joined the Thieves Guild, finally found his human father, who was then killed by bandits, and that was where he needed the vengeance. And he basically begged for anything to give him the power where he could take vengeance on those who had taken away his father, and that's how he became a paladin. And he doesn't know who gave him the power, he just knows that he has this power. But we started at level 1, so I was a paladin, but not Oath of Vengeance. And then by the time you get level 3, now those things come online.
And it doesn't make sense story-wise.
Yeah.
I had the same thing. I played as a friend, my roommate that I'm living with. I was running a session that we're starting up here, and I had a little bit of homebrew, so I was playing like a kind of like Warhammer Croxagore styled character as like a crocodilian homebrew race, and I was trying to go into the Lycopanthy blood hunter subclass, because the whole idea was that I would start kind of like morph out mauling people. And I had that kind of history going back to how the character was raised in his clan and what they did with like blood drinks they would all drink together as they were going through adulthood and rituals and stuff in like their teenage years. That didn't make sense though when I'm starting level 1 and I can't transform, I can't do anything. And I'm like, hey, I have these abilities, but I also don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you got to get really creative with low-level characters. I've noticed that as well in my Baldur's Gate campaign. I'm going to notice that too when it comes to Out of the Abyss. My players are fantastic, but they've a couple of them have already written their character backstories that are 2 pages long. That's great because it gives me a lot of stuff to work with and do fun things with. So.
Just before Sven starts encouraging bad habits from people, 2 pages max. Give information. It's awesome when we know who the parents are, who your rival is. We can add that stuff into the story later on. Suddenly your rival is one of the minions of the BBEG. But when you start handing us like a Google Drive of like a terabyte worth of information and you've made your own items and stuff you want to add into it, we don't have time to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, do try keep it short. Hit on the major points. Give your DM something to play with, and you know what, my players are going to have to understand. There's going to be parts of their backstory that I'm going to pick up, I'm going to run with, and there's going to be parts of it that I'm not even going to bother reading.
But also, any good DM, if they want more information, if they go, well, this is interesting. Like you mentioned how you left your childhood crush to go on adventures. Well, I want to know more about that. What happened?
Yeah.
It's like, well, now I want to bring in the fact that she's now married off to another guy who was your rival, and I want to make it this big thing. So I want more information. They can always come back and ask more and ask you to, what about this? What about that?
And there's always the fun wow factor as well when you do introduce that character and they start connecting the dots. Like they've forgotten their own backstory and then suddenly their dad is there and they're like, wait, what the hell? It's always a great experience for a dungeon master.
That's
when
where
you see that excitement in players.
That's where the good player will remember their backstory. In some cases, like, whose dad is this?
I like to take little nuggets of information that they put into their backstory and just suddenly just like make it a whole big thing, and I'll be like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I having this dream about a bear? What is going on? I'd be like, you wrote that tiny little thing in your backstory. You think I was going to make something out of the whole fucking novel that you wrote? No, I'm going to take that little tiny nugget of information. I'm going to make that a thing. I'm going to make you improvise.
And it's the funniest thing story-wise, well, when they, like you said, Tom, when they don't recognize the person. It's like, imagine like IRL, your dad walks up to you and you're like, who are you? I don't know. But that's pretty much everything, I guess. Or majority, obviously, you could talk about modules versus homebrew for eternity. I've made like a lot of my own homebrew things, and it's great when you have that freedom. I started making for my homebrew story that I'm doing like Mothmen as a main antagonist, which are really cool. I've added flyby from owls so they can't be stricken. I've added the euphoria breath from fairy dragon so that the moth kind of spews this gas on people, and you can combine so many unique things. But no, homebrew is amazing. Modules are amazing. It really depends on your yourself as a person, to be honest. Each of them had their pros and cons. But enough with my topic. What were you wanting to discuss?
I've got one last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When you are writing your own homebrew, do you tend to try and steer away from so homebrew as a module? You're obviously writing using what they have already given you. How often do you do homebrew monsters?
I do it actually quite a bit. I would say I'm 50-50. I enjoy... Okay, so the reason for this, and the reason why I enjoy homebrew monsters, is most of my play group are all very experienced Dungeons & Masters players. They've played it for years. Some of them are going on to decades. And the problem with that is that even innocently, they metagame. They don't even mean to do it. I'll introduce a troll, and they're like, oh, okay... my character doesn't know this, but I suddenly decide to use Firebolt. Oh, go figure. Whereas when I throw a Mothman at them, they're suddenly intrigued. They're drawn in. They don't know what the hell this monster does. Yeah. And that's why I usually do about 50-50. I enjoy bringing back the classics because they suddenly see something cool. And for new characters, obviously, there's already all these amazing pre-made miniatures and stuff that people have for all of these things in Dungeons and Dragons. But I add in homebrew quite a lot. What about yourself? Like homebrew monsters entirely. What about you, Sven? What do you do?
Oh, me, like I said, I don't have time for that shit. I just take the monsters they give me and I try and make them interesting. That's what I
See,
do.
I do like the idea of doing homebrew, or what I've seen before is using stat blocks but just changing the way it looks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even changing the
just-
monster entirely. I took Auriel's second form from the Frost Maiden pre-made module. Auriel's second form. Let me grab the mini. Actually, I've got this here.
Oh yes, please.
Auriel's second form is
show mini.
similar to like a water elemental, but has like a frost crown, a swirl of ice around it. Looks amazing. And so obviously Auriel is like this owl ice god. Doesn't make sense if you suddenly pop it at a bunch of players that are traveling through like some sort of coast. Whereas if you just reskin it or module it all and say that it's like the spirit of the lake or some kind of corrupted water elemental, it suddenly becomes really cool and unique, and people aren't like kind of expecting what it's going to do. So I do the same sort of reskinning thing. It's amazing.
Well, you did say about the coming up against a troll. We had that in one of the one-shots we did, and I was playing a druid at the time. And literally, I was like, do I know what it is? Because, like, Tom knows what it is, but does my character?
Yeah.
So he's like, well,
it's
roll
a tricky
nature
kind of
check.
tightrope
Like,
to
you
deal.
know troll. I'm like, do I know about the whole fire thing? And he's like,
Is that the one that I
yeah.
ran?
I think it
The
may
one,
have
the
been.
one shot of the Oasis? Yeah, the witch
With
hunt?
the owlbear?
Yep.
Yes, that
That's my
was you.
one.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I sat up all night writing that goddamn thing because the normal DM had to pull out last second, so I was like, yeah, I put my hand up, I'll do that, and then I realized I don't have any goddamn one shots prepared, so I stayed up like till 1 o'clock in the morning writing this one shot out, and it worked out really well. But yeah, when you mentioned troll, I was actually about to interject and say the exact same thing because of that run shot that I ran for you, Tom. But you're such an amazing player that you were able to differentiate between what you know and what your character would know. And you're like, what would I know about a troll? And I was like, well, make a knowledge nature or whatever it is for a troll.
I think that's also where, if you are like, I know if I did not have like a specific attack that I always did. So let's say you normally use Eldritch Blast, you get more damage out of it. It makes sense for you to do that. And suddenly a troll pops up and you don't know that it's a troll, and suddenly you decide to use
deviate
to change. That doesn't make sense. That's where I'd ask, does my character know? And if not, it's like, I'm going to use Eldritch Blast until someone else figures it out.
I've had to have some conversations with players for the exact same thing of like having to discuss with them the worst case scenarios where you'll bring in a what have I got here? I'll bring in I'll just keep it with the troll. Just there's still the troll because I've got like an Etten and stuff like that. But the troll's the best one because of the regeneration and the fire aspect. I brought in the troll first time that I did bring it in for a party that was half decade players and half trying D&D for the first time. One player was like, "Oh, okay, they're weak to fire. Everyone hit fire." Said it not in because that person had also been using like a tone when they played their character, role playing and getting kind of cool and fun. It was great, but as soon as that happened, it was just an instant kind of like groan for myself. I had to have a talk to them after, like, you can't say this type of stuff. Like for these other people that are trying it for the first time, they're learning these creatures, finding their weaknesses, and that's the fun thing about it. When you play a game for the first time and you're studying these things in this world and working it out for the first time, it's not fun when someone gives you the GTA codes.
Yeah, it's so weird in a game that is played entirely by vocalization. Sometimes not talking is the right thing to do.
100%.
Don't say anything. I know you're really excited. Oh, it's a troll. I know how to kill the thing. Don't say anything. Sometimes
when I was playing the one shot with you for the first time.
Yep.
Actually, I can't mention that because
you can't. Don't spoil
that. Anyway,
cool stuff coming up, guys.
Something gets mentioned, and I had a preconceived notion from other media as to what it was, and then later in the game when we actually came against it. I'm like, yeah, but the thing is back there somehow. I didn't realize it was the same thing that we'd come up against. I know I'm making this incredibly vague. A little spoiler.
Hey man,
But
if you want to know what Tom's talking about, catch us for part
Yeah.
3
Just
of Amongst
watch the
Shadows and Stone.
finale.
it was a really good one shot. It was a great way to come into D&D.
Yeah.
I had great players.
Oh.
There's great combat. There's a load of social interactions, and also it allows you to have a load of very creative moments. So I was playing a rogue, magic initiate rogue. Is it magic? Arcane trickster. That's it. So I had a few spells to use, and the one shot allows you to use those spells if you're smart, if you're creative. So you feel like you get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to talk myself up. It's a great campaign. Once we're finished with part 3, and I put it up on my Facebook, everyone should be playing it and messaging me telling me how awesome it is.
Your new camera, Sven, is picking up something on your shoulders. I think that's dust. You might need to just wipe that off.
Oh yeah.
What's your topic for tonight, though?
Yeah, my topic was we've already touched upon this a little bit. I was going to talk about like what qualities make for a good DM. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm just going to go across the table. I want you guys to just maybe tell us top 3, or maybe the most important one, or something like that, or top 3. Up to you. Starting with the guy right next to me over here, Tom. What do you think is the most important qualities that a DM should have?
Oh, the most important ones, I think, are obviously being creative. So understanding that at any point your player is going to ask you the one question you had not prepared for, or they're going to go to the one building in the town that you had not assigned anything to. You're just like, there is an open space, I'll put a building there. And they're like, hey, what's that? You're going to need to come up with something on the fly. And that's to say that you don't necessarily have to come up with something new. You could just be like, oh yeah, the tavern was actually in that direction. It's now in that direction, the exact direction you're going. That's the tavern. I'd say as well, being very open about what kind of game they're running and what they expect at their table. I think if you've ever been on Reddit, you've seen like the horror DM stories.
Yep. What's Crit Crab? Yeah, anyone what's Crit Crab?
No. Yes, I do.
I love it.
There is some scary stuff.
There is.
And yeah, you read the interactions there, and even taking D&D out of the equation, they are such terrible social interactions between human beings.
Yep.
You just wonder, how on earth does anyone get away with this? Because in any other situation, you wouldn't be allowed. But for some reason, when it comes down to D&D, there's DMs who just think, oh, I have to do the best for the players regardless. But if you have a problem player, they need to deal with it. Because as a other player, you probably could put your hand up, but that's not the interaction you want between players. It should be the dungeon master running the game, as that is their role. So if you're going to run a very survival-esque campaign, and you're going to ban a few spells, or if you want to make some of your spells work, you're going to have to jump through a few hoops to make it work, because that's the game that you're running. Be very open about that. But if you're going to allow, what is it?
And doing stuff like that, well, you remember, doing stuff like that can make don't shy away from restricting people. It can make a session amazing as a dungeon master. I ran for Halloween 2021. I ran a kind of Town of Salem-esque session with some demons, and I basically restricted anyone from playing paladins, clerics, and then on any other classes like monks and whatnot, there wasn't allowed to be any forms of healing. The only form that I allowed was if you took the healer feat. That way you could use a bandaging kit and a healer's kit to heal people like that. Restrictions like that can make Dungeons and Dragons amazing, because it feels more realistic. Like a tracking one, like you said, you may stop people from being a ranger. Even though that sounds silly, it stops people from having not being lost in a magical forest, which is especially important. But yeah, sorry, continue. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, but if you're going to be playing a horror game, and it's going to be a lot of gore and sort of those sort of things, and someone's just not into that, and they just want to play your very stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons of, oh, I want to go save the princess from the dragon. That may not be what they're after, and you don't want to find that like several sessions in, they're just like, nah, not for me, and they leave, and now you're down a player. It's much better to come forward with that to begin with and make it very clear as to what you expect from them and what they can expect from you.
So yeah, a lot of D&D is based on trust. It's
Yep.
trust between DM and players, trust between players, all that kind of stuff. So you can only build trust with openness. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to be open. You have to be upfront. You have to tell them everything. And my original DM, what did he say? Setting the expectations. That's what session 0 is really about. It's not about making characters, all that kind of stuff. That comes second. First thing, set expectations with your players, and your players set expectations with the DM, so everyone's on the same page. That way everyone can have fun because they get what they want.
Yep. I think what also comes off that as well is the rules. So if you run any different rules,
Yes.
then put that forward. So one of the ones that you brought up on our first game was flanking. You do run flanking, but this is the exact way it works, and also it works the other way around as well. Well, when I went to go play this main campaign, Tyranny of Dragons, I said, do we do flanking? And he went, I'm not sure. And I said, well, this is the way I've been shown it's been done in the past. I'm just asking now. And he went, yeah, that sounds fun. But it also means that if you have a lot of enemies around you, all of a sudden they start all getting advantage
You
on
get
you.
the what's called
They start hitting a
crit
lot more
train.
consistently. Yeah. And then you realize, I love that rule because it makes it more tactical. It's not just, oh, I'll stand next to this guy and it's just hit until they go down. It's now, well, I might want to take a possible attack of opportunity of someone just so I don't get flanked and just don't get surrounded.
Having those like conversations though with the players and the expectations and deciding what you want to do though is extremely important.
Yep.
Perfect example of flanking and getting crits on people is I do know, I've never done it myself yet, but I do know that some DM friends of mine that never run flanking, and the reason being for that is that they say a lot of other classes have all these feats, abilities. There's fighters that have ways of doing it. There's sorcerers that have ways of doing it for their spells. There's rogues, obviously, ways of giving themselves advantage, which make you then getting flanking become entirely, those feats then become useless. There's no point going that subclass of fighter, no point going that subclass of sorcerer and getting all these extra feats, elven accuracy, stuff like that, purely because you've already got advantage. What's the point? So I do know that some people take it out like that so that you have to be even more inventive with how you play the game. Obviously, it takes a lot of skill at that point and people that have been playing D&D for ages. But yeah, thinking about the rules and how you want to run stuff and then telling your players so they understand that and they're not just like, oh, well, he's just being a tight ass, is extremely important.
Yeah, there's a little bit of give and take. Every time you give something else gets taken away. So it's balancing act. So so you got creativity, you got openness. You got one more for us?
I think that's about it, really.
about it?
I mean, it's a two-parter, being open about how exactly you're going to run the game, what kind of game you're running and what you expect of them, and having the creativity.
All right. Let's pass it off to Christian. What do you think is the most important qualities of it?
I wrote down two ones that I'll go into like a longer conversation of, but you've obviously just got the generic stuff. Having experience, I would advise anyone trying to play sessions and play D&D themselves getting first-hand experience for at least even just like 3 sessions before you start DMing yourself. Some people I've heard, or even people that I play with now, have tried jumping into it straight away before they've even played D&D. Like, I'm going to run this for some of my friends, and it's kind of like riding a bike for the first time. It just doesn't really work. And in the situations it does, amazing, lovely. You've done an awesome job. You've overcome Mount Everest. In the situations that it doesn't work, it then almost becomes like a PTSD situation where they just then don't want to DM again ever. Knowing what you do, creativity, being inventive, being energetic, obviously, is always a great boon for being a dungeon master. Being friendly. There's tons of things that you could go over. The two that I've written down, though, that I feel like are big pain points between your friendly DM that is your mate from school and a professional that you go to Adventurers League for, is research and communication. More so communication, I would say, is not just during the session prior, like you said with session 0. The term is what's used for kind of pre-game conversations, session 0. But I mean more so aftermath conversations and communication. For research first, though, I mean more so in the sense I think it's extremely important in so many different ways. When I run a session, I'll give you an example. My second group that I have with my usual games and that kind of world that I'm trying to publish at the moment is called Kingdom of the Savage. It's based in sort of the countries and realms of hobgoblins, goblins, orcs, giants, Goliaths, all this sort of kobolds. This dangerous land, and showing people these other races that aren't as stereotypically shown as they're usually shown. Like the Goliaths act very much like nomad tribes, the orcs act very much like Native Americans, and they have their own cultures. What made me go around and start doing that rather than just having the trope, I'm an orc, I like fighting, I'm bad, which is what everyone knows from Lord of the Rings and every single fantasy thing out there, is research. I spent time researching the orcs themselves. I watched YouTube videos. I spent a lot of time reading, and it's a great source of information for Dungeons and Dragons, the Forgotten Realms wiki. They have information on monsters, the god pantheons, D&D food, everything above and beyond. It's a great area to find places. So I was on there researching about orcs in their structure, the way that they act, their religions, symbols that are important to them. Even if I wasn't using all of this, and like Sven says, writing down a huge document for this NPC, having that knowledge at least skimmed over it, it's kind of like pre-learning for an essay or an exam. You have this stuff to bring in the future. When someone says, what's that NPC doing? You could add a little bit of extra flavor. You can say he's sitting there twiddling around with a little bit of yarn, and it looks like he's turning it into some sort of gauntlet. He comes up and asks what the NPC is doing, and he says that he's making it as a kind of gauntlet that he's going to attach some spikes to, and it's going to be for Yogurt, which is the orc god who is known as the White Hand. Has stuff to do with like usually gloved devout followers. It wasn't an original part, but you threw a little bit of spice in there because you knew that stuff. Researching how races sound. I recently was researching cobra noises because Forgotten Realms told me that this particular creature sounded like a cobra hiss. That's information that you wouldn't have if you didn't take the time to research. If you just throw a stone giant at someone, you're going to do the stereotypical stone giant stuff. If you research stone giant culture, how they act, how they battle, their physiology, their religious beliefs, how they grow up, you can then start to customize everything a lot more detailed. And that's what separates those veteran and experienced dungeon masters, I feel.
I guess that touches on a little bit about what the Wizards of the Coast are trying to pull away from, having evil races.
Yeah.
Where I don't like the trope of the bad man is bad because he's bad. It's, well, they have a different culture to us, or what we believe is normal. And it could be something along the lines of, well, they take slaves, or they believe that any outsiders are evil or some sort of threat to them. And because of the way that they react, they are deemed evil to us.
And opening it up to the Greys makes stories so much more interesting.
Exactly.
Like, one of my favorite Marvel movies is Black Panther for Killmonger. He's one of my favorite characters because his story is so compelling. He's such an amazing character. Obviously, the actor plays him well and amazing as well. But just as a story, he's one of the most interesting villains, subpar a lot of people that they've introduced in the MCU, because he's got that grey atmosphere where you want to strive for him, but you also know that he's the bad guy that kills people, and you're like, oh, okay, well, like, obviously the Black Panther is the person I should be rooting for, but it adds an extra layer onto the narrative.
I saw a meme recently about MCU villains. How a lot of the times you'll be like rooting for the villain, because they've got a point, so they have to like ham fist some type of a scene where they murder an innocent, just so that you can remember that they're actually the bad guy and you're not supposed to be rooting for them. Whereas all the good guys are like, you know, well, at least up to a certain degree, they're all like rich white men. You know, that was just the status quo.
Now,
Well, I
just
think,
when,
like, what you were saying just before with the orcs, to a village, like they could see the orcs as evil. They come in every month or so, and they take a lot of their livestock, and they're really struggling to get by because of these evil orcs. But from the orcs' perspective, they've been here for millennia, and every month they go out on a raiding party or
it's
a
their way of
hunting
life.
party, as to worship their god in some way.
Yeah.
From both points of view, the opposite is the bad guy. It's just
Grum-
a point of which side of the fence you're on.
No, 100%. Grumsh, the main orc god of their pantheon, is the god of war and fighting. Unlike a lot of other pantheons, Odin, Zeus, all these other areas where they're usually the god of strength and protection, or knowledge or things like that, the orc god is, I want you to kill people. So they go around and they do that. People then see them like the farmers, like, oh, they're coming around and slaughtering all of us. Yes, it's bad. It's not good, but to them, it's good, and it adds that extra layer. That being said, I did want to quickly note, so people aren't getting the wrong expectations if they're trying out dungeon mastering for the first time, don't Hollywood everything where you have to make someone sympathetic. Some monsters in D&D are just straight up a-holes. You have a certain chromatic color of dragon. They're not meant to be nice. They're meant to be little bitches that just want to be mean to everyone. So don't feel like you have to, but when you can add it in, the orcs are a Native American tribe. They actually have their own culture. There's different pantheons that you can learn about. Doing that research is especially important, and it helps you create a more colorful world for people to explore. Even though you may be railroading them on a certain area, seeing that NPC do that thing makes the whole interaction of where they are seem more vibrant and alive.
Or to interact.
Exactly. My second point that I feel, like I said, is communication of an aftermath of a session. I feel this is extremely important. It's similar to just in any form of learning, so university, school, anything like that. You've always got homework, and then you've got your grades for your homework. You've got your assessments and your assignments, and then you've got feedback and criticism for how they went and the markings. It helps you not only improve as a dungeon master, asking your players what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, but the especially important part is making sure that people are comfortable. I feel one of the worst things in Dungeons and Dragons is someone, like you said before, doesn't enjoy that type of gore, and you didn't realize they have some they don't enjoy seeing animals be harmed because of something that happened to them personally in their past. They don't want to divulge that in a group of 6 people, some who might be strangers for the first time meeting, or even friends that they just don't feel that open with, or people that may not have correct social interactions, and they might make someone else feel uncomfortable at the table. I know that one of the main problems with Dungeons and Dragons in their community is women feeling either excluded or kind of harassed by the way other people act, and just the awkward kind of social interactions with that of not knowing how to deal with them. And then you get problems of people feeling like they're being sexually harassed, and it starts to get to very serious matters. If you have that aftermath conversation with everyone, whether it's in a group or even just one-on-one, my personal preference is every couple of weeks I'll send everyone a message, just be like, hey, how are you enjoying D&D? Is there anything in particular that you'd like me to start doing? Anything that you'd like to bring up at all? And then that way it gives them that opportunity, so that if there is something that is as serious as that scenario, or something small like, oh, I didn't get a magical item this session, could you maybe add something in for me in the future? You then know to do that, and that person's enjoyment goes from mediocre to exponential.
Yeah,
and that's something that I did with you guys as well before I run Among Shadows and Stone. I just I say, first of all, I ask, this goes out to all DMs. If you're running a game, this is a little bit of advice from me to you. If you're going to start a new campaign, if it's a one shot or anything like that, ask the players if there's anything that they're not comfortable with, and then tell them that you have a way for them to talk to you in private. So, send me a text message or something like that. If there's something that you don't want to be involved in this campaign because it's a trigger for you, it's something maybe that you've experienced in real life, and you don't want to go there, have an open form of communication where they can talk to you privately and make sure it doesn't come up. One thing that I do when I play D&D with, especially with people that I don't know, I just say anything that could be conceived as like sexual assault, sexual harassment, that just doesn't happen in my campaign. Sorry, but if it's part of your backstory, oh my mother or my sister was sexually assaulted by orcs. Sorry, that's not going to be part of my story. Write it out of the character or make a new character. It's just not happening. There are ways that you can involve these difficult subjects in a campaign, but you have to be with the people that you really know and really trust. Speaking of which, do you get a lot of feedback, Christian, when you ask people, how did it go and all that kind of stuff?
I do feel like I have to kind of sometimes, and I feel awkward about it, but press people because it's just human nature a lot of the times, or even just with generally people with D&D who are either introverts or kind-hearted, and we're an amazing community here, people that love Dungeons and Dragons. We're always, from what I've noticed, like 90% of the player base are very caring people. The problem with that though is that they often feel awkward bringing problems up. They don't want confrontation, and so I do have trouble getting the truth out of people. Yeah. They want to just they don't want to cause trouble for someone else or for me, and so they don't mention that. That's why I do sometimes have to press them, like, are you sure? I'll bring up stuff that I've noticed, even if it wasn't a problem for them, like, hey, I heard they made this comment in the session, it kind of annoyed me a little bit, did it annoy you? And get their perspective.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to get like honest feedback from people when I run a game. A lot of the times, like, yeah, it was really good. Come on, man. Tell me what I did wrong. I don't want to know what I did right. Tell me what I did wrong, because then I can avoid it in the future. Who wants to know what my three top qualities of a DM are?
Now let's skip it. Next story.
Okay, and I'm going to mute Christian for a little while. No, all right. I'm going to make it real quick. All right. So number one, already touched on this. Confidence. You got to be confident. All this other stuff. You can be creative. You can have communication and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not confident with communicating with people, it just all falls apart. So number one, confidence. And
I guess it's a case of you don't need to believe that that's the correct answer. You just need your players to believe that that's the correct answer.
Exactly. Yeah, it works with gameplay as well as like the mechanics of running a game. Yeah. If you have a problem player, you need to be confident enough to be able to go, you're not part of this game anymore. I'm sorry. Or like to bring them aside and talk to them face to face and say, look, I don't like this thing that you're doing. Is there a way that we can change that? And if they're not going to work with you on that, then you have to be confident enough as a person to be able to say, I'm sorry, but maybe this campaign isn't for you, and because you don't want to be trying to avoid confrontation, and then it just it destroys everyone else's fun because you've got this one player that's doing this one thing or these multiple things. Of course, you got to be confident first of all to try and find a good solution that works for everyone, and then you got to have the confidence to be able to step on some toes if you've got to be able, if you have to step on some
unfortunate toes. Situations when it kind of comes to that. It's only very rarely when it does, and it's always awkward. But if you can't get to that and can't do that, have that conversation with that person causing that problem, and you've tried fixing it over and over, it can destroy the entire group and friendships.
And if you're having trouble with that, get some help. I'm sure that you probably know someone who's that kind of person who can just say anything to anyone. Like I said, there was a
message
time...
me, I'll do it.
Hey, message me. I'm a bouncer, man. That's what I do. I tell people no all the time. No, you got to leave. Oh, but I have seen that wrong. Too bad. You got to go, buddy.
I have seen that in some of the Reddit threads saying that if you're having issues, get somebody else who's a DM to just sit and watch the game, and just if you're not sure that you are seeing that correctly, then they can be like, oh no, yeah, you totally need to pull them up.
And I'll put my hand up right now. Anyone that's watching this, if you have a problem in your game, if you have a problem player, you don't know how to deal with it, you want some backup or a second opinion, just send us a message on Facebook, and of course I'm willing to help out whenever I can. Because I want to make D&D as much fun for as many people as possible. That's what this is all about. I'm not getting paid to do this. This is a passion project. Would like to get paid, but that's not going to happen. So just hit me up anytime, anyone. If you want help with something, I'm not the most experienced DM in the world. I know that.
You heard that? He said, if you want help with something, so people, next year, when it's time for your tax, message Sven.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I'll help you with your tax. Absolutely. I'm not good at it, but I'm confident enough to give it a go.
He'll even bring that sword.
Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah.
It's not sharp, just so you know. But I mean, I could definitely brain someone with that. It is a sparring sword. What else? Oh, I took it off my screen. Okay, so second one. This is one that Tom, you already mentioned, so I won't go into it too deeply. Creativity. You got to be creative. You got to be confident. You got to be creative. Put those two things together, and you're going to make a really fun game for everyone. And the third one and the last one is active listening. Yeah, that's such an important part of being a DM. I find if you're like
Sorry, what was
that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mute. If you're tuning out, or if you just want to run the game the way that you want to run it, it's not going to be fun for people. You've got to always be listening to what people are saying, and that's actually something that is a skill you have to acquire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people who are in roles where they've got to talk to people all the time are a little bit more skillful in that already. Other people who work on their own a lot or don't interact with many people don't have that skill, but that's an extremely important thing. Google it, find out what active listening is, and try and master that, because that's that little cherry on top. That is the difference between like a good DM and a great DM, is someone who can actively listen, and that's something that I try and work on because I know I'm really horrible at it. Fizz Cannon says top 3 qualities: know what your players want. Do they like combat, exploration, social stuff? Number 2, know their characters' motives. For instance, an example that he gives is you see a dark mansion on a hilltop and it looks like it's filled with undead. Some players will straight walk on by, but if you know their character likes baked goods, you could lure them in with a simple smell. That's a good point. And improv. You have to be able to change things on the fly. And I think that's where like we cover it with like creativity. I think that sort of blends into it.
I do like that second point an awful lot. I think also tying in with one of your points, Chris, was having that discussion after the fact of saying, how did you think that went, and what are your plans? Like, how are you going to develop your character? Such as, if they're coming to a point like level 8 or level 12, where they may be picking a feat, maybe they're looking to multi-class, something along those lines. Maybe they want to try and tie that in with the story. What are their motives within this story? Is it the case of they keep getting paid and they want to make more money? Or is it a case of the person they're chasing down has irked them for a very specific reason, and that's what they're going after? I think having that information and then being able to tie that into the story further just helps better their experience.
Yeah, the whole baked sweets thing is a perfect example. Like, I do the same thing with my personal ones to get people interested or to cause even just chaos. I tempted one of the players who had, like you said, had told me that they were planning on going into this subclass and we're going to take this feat because they eventually wanted to wield a glaive and have like sentinel and all the overpowered things. So what I did was, in the next session, I had the bad guy who was wielding a magical glaive, and the party was like deciding, like, do we run away from this? We're nearly being TPK'd. And that one player was like causing the strife of like, no, we need to take him on. Like, I want that weapon. And it wasn't even above board metagaming. His character admired that weapon and wanted it, and it just created the cool conflict of just again further layers in the story.
All right, I'm going to have to interject because I have a little bit of a special sort of announcement that I got to make in regards to the future streams on the channel. Oh, what does that sound? What was that?
How was that? I was trying to give you a drum roll.
Oh, that was the drum roll. Oh my god. Oh, I thought I dropped my microphone or something. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the attempt there. I think you rolled what was that, a natural 3 on your performance check?
Yeah.
Also, I wouldn't say it wasn't a natural 1, but it wasn't great.
Best I can do is the spoons.
All right. So, as anyone who, or not anyone, but people who've watched my previous streams, you probably know. Oh, gee, I'm getting another sound coming in there. Oh, are you guys hearing that as well?
Yep.
Yeah. Is it going away? No. Yep. Okay, it's gone. That was weird. Anyway, as you guys might know if you've watched the previous streams, I am about to start a brand new campaign, which we are going to be streaming live on Twitch, and the session 0 for that is going to be, I believe, on the 11th of March, or is it the 4th? I have to double check that. Anyway, episode 1 for our brand new stream, Crit and Miss Out of the Abyss, is going to be airing on the 18th of March at 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And I got a little bit of an exciting bit of news to share. I got in touch with a couple of people on the amazing D&D community, or in the amazing D&D community, I should say, and they've been so kind to work with me to make a little giveaway that we're going to be doing for our Out of the Abyss campaign. So we're going to have 3 giveaways that we're going to be doing. All you have to do to get involved in that is join us for episode 1 of Crit and Miss Out of the Abyss on the 18th of March at 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And I want you to leave a message in the chat, follow us on Twitch, and leave a message with the chat with the words hashtag Out of the Abyss, followed up with whatever your favorite D&D or fantasy monster is. So, for instance, if you really like Beholders, hashtag Out of the Abyss, and maybe just Beholder. If you do that, you're going to go in the draw to win something. It's not huge stuff, but it's pretty cool. So the first one you'll be seeing in the center of the stream there is a little. How did I send this out? It's called the Central Market. It's a compendium of shops, including a list of inventory prices, the sources that the items come from, shop owners, quest hooks. It's all in there, and it's just a little additional module that you can have ready when you're running your games. And you're going to get a free PDF download of that. So 3 people are going to be getting that, and then one lucky person is also going to be winning. That should be coming up momentarily. A really cool mini from Froth's Mini on Facebook. They've been so kind as to donate a mini for us. That should be, yep, you can see it now, of like a mutated what are they called? Mind Flayer. It's like got an eye coming out of his shoulder and all this kind of stuff. And that person will also be getting a cool D&D themed glass, which you can get from Smouldering Designs on Etsy. They've been so kind as to donate that to us. So we're going to have 3 winners. 2 people are going to get the Central Market, a free PDF of the Central Market. I've got a copy of that. I was looking through it the other day, and it's really awesome. In a second, I might read a little bit from it, so you know what you're going to get. And one person is going to be winning the D&D Mini and the Dungeon Master Glass, which you can see up on the screen there if you're watching the stream live or watching it back on YouTube. So that's going to be pretty cool. So all you have to do is join us for episode 1. Leave hashtag Out of the Abyss in the chat. As well as whatever your favorite D&D monster is, and then on the second episode, which will be airing a fortnight after that one, I will be announcing the winner. Pretty cool, right?
Oh, definitely.
Which will be me.
I want that mini.
I don't know about that. Tom, you're Better luck next time. I'll just say that.
Not gonna lie, that mini does look pretty badass. Hopefully that'll be arriving soon, and I'll be able to actually hold that up to the camera for you guys to see. So yeah, like I said, give us a follow on Twitch. Leave that message in the chat for episode 1, and join us again for episode 2 for the announcement of the winner. Yes, Christian.
Just to draw some excitement on the hashtag and your favorite monster, if we have time, why don't we quickly go around and each say our favorite monster? Because I think that's cool. I love ranking stuff and whatnot. But you're number 1.
All right.
I was I was looking around when you mentioned it and like deciding, and I've got mine.
You got your one. All right. Well, why don't you get us started?
I'll go. My favorite Dungeons and Dragon monster, and I first got into it when I started playing. It was similar to the PvP mode we were talking about. It was really cool. It was a bunch of DMs who all got together, and we were doing tournament style where we would control monsters rather than PCs. And it was an amazing atmosphere to learn all these new monsters that you'd never experienced before, how they fight, and you would get points on things you would kill and whatnot. You had a certain CR rating of whatnot. It was like a Pokemon battle almost. And my favorite one that I always used, because it was extremely overpowered, so it's always good to fight your players with this then, is the Battle Force Angel. So she's from the Guilds of Ravnica story, but obviously that doesn't restrict you from adding into a normal campaign, because Angel can be literally anywhere. But the Battle Force Angel is a 12d8 plus 12 hit points, averaging on 66, but you can bump that up all the way to nearly 100 hit points, 30 movements, but 90 fly feet, which is insane, nearing on to some ancient dragons with 120, 18 AC, because it wears plate mail over the top, like holy plate mail all over it. Has advantage on charisma and wisdom saving throws, which are most of the things that bards and enchanters and whatnot are going to be trying to throw at you. The most common damage that mages will try to use, fire, it has resistance to. It has resistance to fire and radiant. It has immunities to charmed, exhausted, and frightened, some of the worst conditions that you can get. Dark vision and true sight, so it can see through magical darkness. It has my favorite thing, and this is one of the reasons I added it onto the Mothmen, of flyby, which means that when the creature attacks someone and leaves their area, it doesn't provoke an opportunity of attack, so they don't get a chance to hit by. So this Battle Force Angel keeps swooping continuously with its 90 movement. It then also has magical resistance, so advantage to saving throws, which is just so overpowered. Multi-attack, so it gets to hit twice with its longsword, which is a +6 to hit, 7 damage of slashing, or 8 damage of slashing if you're using it two-handed, which you're always going to be, a d10 +3, which isn't a whole lot, but it then deals 4d8 radiant damage on top of that. There's no save or anything, it's just flat, they take the damage. Also then, if the target is within 5 feet of one of the angel's allies, the target takes an extra 2 damage of 1d4. So that's an added thing on top. And then the final part is Battlefield Inspiration, where as an additional action, it uses this when it attacks as well. The angel chooses up to 3 targets within 30 feet, and each of those targets on their next turn, until the angel's next turn, so basically on their next turn, gets an added d4 to attack rolls and saving throws. So it's kind of small bardic inspiration, but it can also be used on saving throws as well, which is important, not just ability checks, which is what bardic inspiration does. So the game plan and what I use this for is I have 2 Battle Force Angels, so they're continuously flying by. They're battle inspiration not only themselves but each other, and then when they start flanking someone, they're getting advantage on their attack throws, they're adding a d4, so they're always hitting, and then they deal that extra 1d4 of damage on top of the 4d8, the 1d10, and it just becomes a slaughter fest of, when I did introduce these, it was a situation of the players trying to survive them and then convince them to stop attacking them. It wasn't a, can we defeat these bad guys and what loot they have? It was a survival scenario. So they are 100% my favorite monster, the Battle Force Angel.
Battle Force Angel.
They definitely sound overpowered, and I hope I never come across one.
All right, Tom, you're next. Favorite monster? Is it me?
Mind Flayer.
Okay, the classics. Very cool.
Yes.
Though
Before-
underused.
Before I even knew anything about them, just looking at the art for them, I absolutely love it. I love Call of Cthulhu. I love octopuses in general. Anything to do with tentacles and things like that. I love that sort of look.
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to go there.
Yes.
You'll be happy in Japan. I'll just put it that way.
We
I agree
love
with
that.
one.
And then once I learnt more about them, the idea of having a hive mind, and I find them very interesting because they're not, they don't do a huge amount of like physical damage. It's not like a fighter where they just hit really hard and they're really hard to hit. They've just got some very interesting features and abilities that make them a very unique threat. You need to come at them at a very specific angle. You can't just overpower them. And I found that at the lower level players as well is a larger issue. So you come across goblins or kobolds, they're very much a case of they have X amount of health, they do X amount of damage. Realistically, when you get to a certain point, you could probably hit them in, kill them in one. And it's just a case of, there's 12, that's going to take us X amount of rounds to get through. They all do this much damage, we should be able to take them, yeah. There doesn't seem to be anything where you don't need to plan too much other than that. And then you get to higher levels, that's when you get a lot of interesting stuff. I like the interesting stuff. I wish they had more of that at a lower level.
I also love with the mind flayers as well, exactly what you're saying of different ways to fight things. But I also love with mind flayers in particular, and this is where doing your research comes into it. But mind flayers infecting or more so converting other races and other creatures into mind flayer hybrids. One perfect example is if you guys saw the Fizzband dragons that came out. There's the Illithid dragon, which artwork looks insane. There's then also there isn't a D&D version of it. I plan on making my own homebrew one that my Patreon supporters will be able to get access to on D&D Beyond. But there's Illithid ropers as well. So roper being the staglamite creature that has arms. Illithid ropers, which are used as like guardians for their underdeep cities, and they have this whole culture of different creatures that have been like genetically changed and are now being controlled by the mind of an illithid, a mind flayer. It's a lot more inventive than just throwing an illithid by itself is battle enough. But when you're traveling through the underdeep, that party is in their city. It's not just a boring one mind flayer, another mind flayer, another mind flayer. You can add all this different variety, but it's still themed.
Yep.
What I love about the mind flayers is I really love the lore behind mind flayers. They're so alien and so weird. And when I say alien, they're actual aliens. That's my favorite. And like, you've never played Baldur's Gate. If you ever played Baldur's Gate, man, when you get up to the mind flayers, it is just it'll stick with you forever.
One of my one shots for D&D Hermes, one of the because we got a couple of really just max level ones for people to enjoy, and they're more so difficult. One is like an ancient blue dragon. Another one is a Everfrost frost giant, and the third one is a mind flayer because I love them. They're cool, like you said, Tom. And the whole plot of it is that with the mind flayers, a little bit of backstory on them, as Sven was just saying, is that they there's speculation by like the wizards in D&D. So this isn't real person speculation, but what the fantasy people speculate when they've philosophized is that mind flayers came from another universe, previous universe, traveled here on these arcs, these ancient ships. But over millenniums, their races now forgot how to fly these ships. So that's why they're trapped there, and they used to be basically a race that controlled the entire universe they were previously in. So that's why they're often colonizing other races, other areas, because that's what they're used to doing. My one shot, I'm going into that 100% where these people are playing like a barbarian with a sword, a ranger with a bow, and I'm throwing them into like the last ship that has a mind flayer and cryo that still knows how to use the ship, and it's adding this sci-fi versus medieval, and it's so cool.
That's actually part of the a big part of the Baldur's Gate 3 is the whole mind flayer thing. I've seen, but I haven't had the. Who wants to know what my favorite?
What is yours? Hit us.
Who wants to take a guess?
If you're interested with lore and mind flayers, I'm gonna say gelatinous cube.
Okay. All right. Tom, what do you got for me?
I'm gonna go Basilisk.
Basilisk. Basilisk is pretty high up there, but it's not quite. It's not quite there. Just for the absolute sheer chaos of it, my favorite is just that old D&D classic. It is an orcish barmaid. Yeah, you're right. Fizz cannon. No, thank you. No, it is of course
Okay,
Beholder.
yeah. Lovely
one
classic.
of those bad boys. Not just for the absolutely insane mechanics of having to run and fight a beholder and all the different magical effects that they can create with their eyes. If you read the lore about beholders, that shit is crazy. The way that they reproduce, for instance, is they're so paranoid that paranoia like seeps into their very dreams, and they're so powerful with like this psychic magic that their dreams actually alter reality around them and creates a whole new beholder. And they're so paranoid that the first thing that they do is they start fighting with this other beholder, and that's how they reproduce. Like that's the craziest freaking thing that I've ever heard of, and that's why I love beholders. It's not necessarily because they're insanely powerful and there's like a whole bunch of different iterations that you can throw at your players. It's that
Exactly. The iteration's exactly like the Illithids. I actually I'm planning on for Dean Hermes making one for the lovely Mind Witness just here. The mini looks amazing with the kind of like clear eyes and dead structure, but the Mind Flayers are just an extremely creepy, cool. Sorry, not Mind Flayers.
beholders.
Beholders are very fun. I actually was reading Reddit the other day. The
You're gonna love it.
and there was a plot basically where they don't always have to be a bad guy, but that you just, if you research these people, the paranoia is a really cool thing. They basically had it where a town was being run by these like knights who were it was a previously kind of like Wild West, very unruly land, raiding everywhere, bandits and whatnot. And then suddenly, and this was the story hook, it had been taken over by these knights who stopped everything. They started kind of turning into a police state and making it safe for people, which was good. It was a positive note. What the party ends up learning over the course of this one shot is that it's actually a beholder under the city in this kind of crypt that is so paranoid of other beholders and people trying to attack it that it is communicating telepathically to the knights, pretending to be a celestial god to them that they're worshipping, and is using them as a human militia. So he's protecting himself with this kingdom. And so the players are like, do we kill the beholder and let the land go back to becoming a lawless, horrible place? Or do we leave this creature controlling these people and taking away some of their free will? Like it's a 50, it'd be really become interesting with these characters. So yeah, the beholder is an awesome monster.
Yeah, really love beholder. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to actually run one yet, but I really want to. So look out for that shit, because that's going to happen. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull us up there. I did say I didn't want this stream to last more than 2 hours, and I think we've just hit the 2 hour mark, if I'm not mistaken, if you include my little technical hiccup at the beginning of the stream. So there's just a couple of things I want to touch on before we finish up. Of course, before the stream started, you guys heard a little bit of music. That is the theme song for the upcoming Crit and Mist Out of the Abyss campaign, starting on the 18th of March, which I mentioned earlier. And that song was written for me by Gus Honeychurch, and you can find his music on or all of his work on his Instagram page. We're sharing that in the chat for you guys. Another thing is I always have to mention my good friends over at the Dungeonroos. If you've watched the Amongst Shadows and Stone, you know George. He's one of the cast members for the Dungeonroos podcast. Tom, you're also one of the cast members for the Dungeonroos podcast. Unfortunately, I wanted to get to know a little bit about your character, but we've run out of time. If we do this again, I'm going to get you back on so you can give us a little bit of insight into that.
That would be awesome.
So I will share their podcast. Where is it? Oh, I don't have it here. Damn it. Tom, while I'm talking, can you get the link for the Dungeonroos Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign and share that in the chat? While
I shall see if I can.
Like I mentioned earlier, all of my streams are available to watch live on Twitch, of course, but they also, I'm going to be putting them up on YouTube and Spotify. So if you miss the live stream, there's a couple of links in the chat there. That is the YouTube one, and then we have one for Spotify as well if you want to listen to it while you're driving. Alrighty, got that out of the way. We wanted to share the links for our for my sponsors for the little giveaway. I forgot to do that earlier. So we have the Central Market. If you don't want to wait and get out of here. If you don't want to wait until the 18th of March to see if you win this one, head over to the DMs Guild, and it's available for purchase there. And then we have the guys over at Smoldering Designs as well. I'm going to share their Etsy link in the chat. Check them out. They have, not only do they have the DM glass, which I showed you guys earlier, that one right there, they have one for pretty much every class of character: Ranger, Fighter, Paladin, and also subclasses as well. So if you want maybe a gift for some of your players, maybe something to put in the background or in your gaming room, these are an awesome idea. They're, that each one has a different little design on it. They're awesome, and you can get packs of 6 or 9 or something like that. Anything else? No, I don't see anything else. Of course, we have part 3 of Amongst Shadows and Stone coming up. That's been changed. It was originally the 11th of March, but we've moved that to the 12th of March just because of availability issues. So that's going to be on Saturday, the 12th of March at 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Join myself as the DM, Christian as the co-DM. Of course, we're going to have Hadrian coming back as Count Goldream. We're going to have Grace coming back, who's going to be playing
Thistle.
Thistle, that's the one. I was going to say like Twig or Stick or something like that. No, Thistle, playing Thistle, the druid who likes to cast Moonbeam on herself and knock herself unconscious. That's always fun. And who knows? Toby's going to be joining us, but who will he be playing? He's going to have to join us for part 3, the thrilling conclusion for Amongst Shadows and Stone. Before I go, guys, I just want to I want to start making this a regular thing for my streams, for my YouTube and Spotify, just to give a little outro message. But before I get into that, I just want to give you guys a chance to say something as well before we finish up. So, Tom, is there anything you wanted to say?
Just want to give a shout out to the Dungeonroos, who I get to play with. We're doing Wild Beyond the Witchlight at the moment. Don't know how many of you are aware of the campaign, but it's amazing in comparison to some of the other campaigns that are going. You can apparently go through the entire campaign without going into combat once. So it's very much a case of social interactions, role playing, which I love to get the chance to do. I'm also playing with a great crew of people who definitely know what they're doing, so it's worth checking out. And it's for a good cause. It was set up to support veterans and current serving members of the Defence Force. A lot of us agree that there's too many suicides within that community. And being in Townsville and Garrison City, you can't not know somebody or be affected by some form of the Defence Force or ex-serving members.
Yep.
So we all agree it's something that needs to improve, and this is one of the ways that we hope to raise awareness and hopefully at some point raise money towards a lot of the causes that are out there.
100%.
It's also a really positive way to even use the game as a medium to take up a lot of these issues. If something happens in the story, just giving people a kind of like actual example of stuff that may happen in veteran lives and put it in perspective.
Yeah, I think Fizz touched on that earlier on when we were talking. Like, Dungeons and Dragons can be a way for you to work out the difficulties that you're facing, as long as you have a group of people that you really trust. And Tom, the players that you have in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign, they are absolutely awesome, and they're getting up to some like really funny shit. So yeah, check out the Dungeonroos, guys. Not only is it a really fun campaign to listen to, you have a lot of laughs, especially the names. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but it is also there for a good cause. George is raising some money by doing a pack march and that kind of stuff. So I cannot say this enough. Check out the Dungeonroos, and they've also been huge supporters of me. And I did want to mention real quick in the chat, my good friend Fizz Cannon, also a huge supporter of the stream. So I wanted to say thanks to you as well, Fizz Cannon. He's actually the guy that got us onto Above VTT when we first started streaming with Authentic Gaming's channel. Yeah, so thank you for that. Check out Above VTT, guys. If you're going to be playing a game online, it is a virtual tabletop that integrates with Google Chrome, and I think Firefox now as well. And it just makes your life so much easier as a DM. I'm going to pass it over to you, Christian.
I'll keep it pretty simple. Like all small businesses, I'm going to jam advertisement down your throat. No, basically, we've got a lot of new content coming out, and just the content that I will briefly go over now isn't even like charge stuff. I'm not asking you to spend money or whatnot. It's just ways to help us grow. So across our Patreon, we've recently just started that up. We've got the different tiers of support: $5 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month. Any sort of support like that helps us grow. Eventually get to that point of making a game store and everything, releasing published stories and whatnot, modules. And it's amazing. I enjoy this job more than anything I've ever done in my life, and I want to make it a continuous thing and bring happiness to other people through it. But on the Patreon, we're going to be adding on. Going to be starting to do podcasts discussing similar things like this. I'm going to be bringing on a lot of different guests. Hopefully, I haven't discussed this yet. I'm going to be bringing on Sven. I'm going to be bringing on people from Dungeonroos. I'm bringing in people from 100 Rats, Art and Roleplay, a lot of different areas, whether they're D&D or not D&D, discussing a lot of different things. And those podcasts will only be available to Patreon supporters. So jump on that. Across our TikTok, my partner, and we've also recently got a marketing manager, Bree, who's going to be helping us with that, of making a bunch of new TikToks. I had the idea of starting a trend or challenge. If any of you have watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, there's a challenge of doing the JoJo pose, or like different JoJo poses. I'm going to turn that into a D&D thing, where I'm going to find monsters from D&D, humanoid hopefully in nature, and try to do their poses on TikToks. I'll do like 3 or 4 per post. Across our Facebook as well, finally, I'm going to be starting a series of vlogs, or like small videos ranging from 5 to 10 minutes, purely because, like how I told you guys, research is insanely important to me with Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm going to be explaining, the title of the series is going to be called Article of the Atrocious. It is going to be about all the different monsters in D&D across all different editions, edition 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to be finding interesting monsters, or monsters that are underused, like kobolds and goblins and small things like that, or interesting things that are never used, like mind witnesses or bronze dragons, or new things that aren't in Dungeons and Dragons, like the Mothman I'm talking about. And all of these creatures, I'm basically going to give a rough explanation of their biography, so that way you don't need to do the research. You can listen to this while you're in your car driving to work or whatnot, similar to Sven's Spotify. And I'm also going to be giving rundowns of how to use them in combat. That is one of the main things when you have a monster that you want to do in Dungeons and Dragons. And just to give you a quick kind of spoiler for that, goblins, for example. Goblins are often underused or used in small raiding parties along the side of a road. They'll get killed, and it's a small, uneventful combat. One interesting way that you can use them is if you start to introduce hunting tactics for them. These are intelligent creatures. They're intellectual, civilized. They're not a bunch of barbaric hooligans. They're going to have a tactic for how they hunt beasts and humanoids and people that they try to capture as slaves. So one thing that you can do is what hunters use in real life. Those kind of hunters' posts up in canopies and trees that are camouflaged have a bunch of goblins that are sitting inside those in the trees alongside a path, have a couple of goblins that are then mounted on wargs or wolves or boars, something that they've trained and tamed in the forests. It adds more kind of backstory to them. And then have the kind of cavalry attack as the archers start shooting. The players then can't see the archers unless they make some sort of perception check, which takes an entire turn for them. And if they fail the perception check, they've then wasted their turn. So it makes this small goblin fight suddenly detrimental. And yeah, basically with all of these different Article of the Atrocious, I'm going to be explaining monsters and interesting ways that you can use them, so that way you can be a bit more inventive in your D&D. So that'll be up on Facebook in the coming weeks. But yeah, that's D&D Hermes and our up-and-coming stuff. So give us a like and follow on all those socials, and that way you can keep a track of all this new things coming out.
Article of the Atrocious. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the name of my biography when I die. Like I mentioned earlier, with every one of these streams, I just want to give a little bit of an outro, just to leave things on a well, not necessarily a positive note, but just something for everyone to go away to think about until the next stream airs. Today I just have written in my notebook just ad-lib outro about bullying. Unfortunately, bullying is something that is very prevalent still in our society, and when I say bullying, you might immediately start thinking of like bullying in the schoolyard or in a school environment. Yes, that happens a lot, and it shouldn't be happening, but unfortunately it's not only limited to the school. You know, it's happening in pretty much every part of society that you can think of. It's happening in workplaces. It's happening right now on the international scene, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. You know, it happens pretty much everywhere, and it's just something that I wanted to, you know, help raise a little bit of awareness about. If you or someone that you know is experiencing bullying and you're just not quite sure how to deal with it, what to do, whether it be in the workplace, because I'm sure everyone here has probably experienced some type of bullying at some point, whether they were the person being bullied or whether you've experienced it. Sometimes you just don't know what the right way to deal with it is, and it can lead to extremely tragic consequences for yourself, for family members, mothers, fathers, children especially. I've got 2 young kids, and it's something that we have to worry about, you know, every day. So if you just don't know what to do, the government has a really awesome website. I'm going to chuck that in the chat as well. Go on there. It has a lot of really cool resources, a lot of good resources for you to use to find ways to deal with bullying, because sometimes the old age-old adage of just tell someone is just not going to be enough, because even that person might not know what to do. So this website will give you the resources that you need to reach out for help, because obviously we don't want to go down that road. You know, people being it can lead to depression and far worse things. So just that web page is just bullyingnoway.gov.au. So I'm not going to spell that out for you. Just bullyingnoway.gov.au. So check that out. If you or anyone that you know has experienced bullying. And on that note, I want to thank you, all the people that joined us for Critical Conversations live tonight. I hope I haven't talked your ear off. But no, I really appreciate the support, guys. And thank you, Christian. And thank you, Tom, especially for joining me on short notice. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.